Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Aspiring Adult Podcast. My name is Alexandra Hayek, and I'm your host. Here with me today is my very good friend Maggie. Maggie and I met during my study abroad in Spain and became very quick friends. So yeah, I'm so excited to talk to her. And for you guys to get to know her, Maggie, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, hi guys. Like she said, my name is Maggie. We met in Spain because we were roomies and instantly hit it off. We knew each other for like 2 days and then planned a 2 week trip to Italy together, which was so much fun. Um, I am 23. I live in Maryland as of like 6 months ago, which is very new because I grew up not in Maryland. But I am out here looking for work in the government as like a linguist slash international affairs person. So far, it's not going well, but we're still here because I moved here without a job and we're going to make it work.
Amazing. Also,
Yep.
wait, shout out. Me and Jasmine mentioned you.
You did. I did get the shout out in your podcast. I am the friend that's 23 and married. For those of you who are keeping track, that is me. If you
Exactly.
hear any creaking noises in the background, that is in fact my husband gaming in his chair because we share an office.
Love to see it. Love to see it. Okay.
Yep.
So when did you know what you wanted to do? So like why when did you know that you wanted to study this and that you wanted to go into this field? Is that still the reason why, or did it change?
So I knew that I wanted to do languages in high school. I had been taking Spanish as a class since I was like 7 and still wasn't very good at it. And then in high school, I had a very good teacher twice who was just wonderful and really fostered my love for languages and like language as a concept. When I started learning about language as something more in depth than just like memorizing vocabulary, but all the different things you can learn about how speaking a different language is not just translating what you're saying from one to another. Like it's a totally different, it's like its own world. And she really fostered that within me. So I knew I wanted to go into languages, but I was also really big on like English and literature because I like to read. And so my when I went to college, I started as an English major with a Spanish minor. And by the time I graduated, I was an English and Spanish double major with minors in Russian, um, and I should have had a minor in Arabic, but because I studied in Spain, I couldn't finish it. But I also did like a concentration in linguistics. So, like, somewhere during that time, I started really realizing that I liked learning new languages and the skills that that brought me. And I'm talking to Alex here, who's like trilingual, which blows. Literally, I was like, yeah, I meet her in Spain. I'm like, I'm studying all these languages. She's like, oh yeah, I speak English, Spanish, and French since birth. Out the womb, trilingual, no biggie.
Well,
Okay,
the
thank you so
English
much. No,
English
I know the English was later, but still. Your English is phenomenal. You like to use, well, English isn't my first language. Well, sometimes it's still better than mine. So
I
you do a
only
very good job, and I'm inspired by you. Anyway, in college, I learned that that was something I really wanted to pursue. And then I went abroad to Spain and did a lot of traveling in a very short amount of time. And I was like, I can do something with this. There are a lot of jobs in the government that let you do things like linguists, like they want you because you can speak a lot of languages, because you can understand and provide like critical thinking to, it's called like being a an analyst or linguistic analysis. So you sit in a little black box with, you'll leave your phone outside, and then they give you things to translate and tell them all the nuance about. And I was like, I can totally do that. Furthermore, I have a cousin who works in the government and she does a lot of travel. Now she works on like environmental stuff, but she was telling me that there are a lot of positions where if I wanted to do linguistics, if I wanted to learn more about language and international affairs, that that would open a lot of doors for getting to travel and being involved in outreach and other such like literacy type projects around the world was also something that I was interested in. So I was like, these kind of all go hand in hand, and I'm going to move to DC without a job and make it work. So I'd say somewhere between high school and my sophomore year of college that I really kind of decided on my field.
you went from okay, this is something that I like, and then found a job that thing would help you get. Like that's kind of the way that you did it. Whereas like
Yeah.
I went more like, okay, this is what I want to do. How do I get there? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel like I found, so I like to learn languages and I like to travel and I like to do analysis things. And I said, well, here's a job where I can do all those things. And in learning about this field, more and more, I'm learning that there's a lot of good that I can do with my skills once I get my foot in the door and start working. Right now, I work a slightly above minimum wage job to make sure that we can pay rent every month. But the more that I'm delving into this world, the more I'm realizing that there's a lot that I can do as um like a civil servant, basically is what it would be. My position would be in its most general term, which is just like service to either the government or to the country or to other countries. My dream job is to work for the Foreign Service. Those are the people who staff the embassies around the world, the US embassies. And they will pay for you to learn new languages if they like the work you do. They will say, go to our school, the Foreign Service Institute, learn this new language, and then go to a country and do the work that you're good at in that country. And that's like totally the most amazing thing I've ever heard, but it's very hard to get into. So they do anything from like, helping United States nationals who are abroad get home, like if they've lost their passport, to like humanitarian crises, assisting in those, to humanitarian just like efforts in other countries. And so that's something that I really want to get involved in. But that's like the very top of what like my field is. That's like the very end goal. And now that I've learned about those things and learned that my skills and the things that I'm interested in are applicable, that's where I want to go. So that's kind of like the direction that I've put myself in.
And you'll get there slowly but surely
Someday.
someday. Okay, so um my next question for you is who has inspired you? I know that I have a lot of people or things that inspire me to do what I do every day or try and get where I want to go. So I just want to know who that person or that thing is for you, if there is one.
I would say the closest thing that I have to that is my cousin who I was talking about. She's not actually my cousin, she's my cousin's wife, but I call her my cousin because I talk to her more than I talk to my actual cousin. Her name is Hannah, and I love her. She's like the chief of staff for some senator named John, some old guy, I don't know. But she travels like everywhere. I was trying to get her to my new apartment that I've lived in for 6 months for dinner. And I was like, so what's your schedule look like? She's like, oh, well, I'm going to be in Greece, and then we have the summit in Germany, and then we're doing this other thing, and I'm going to Norway or something like that. And I'm like, you live the coolest life. And she's like, yeah, whatever. I don't ever have to go back to Germany. Germany's lame. I'm like, you got to Germany. So she would probably be my biggest role model or someone who's inspired me a lot, because she's in this position where she really likes what she does and she is grateful for the things that she does. And when she goes abroad, she, does her work. And then she also spends time, like she'll plan trips around her work travel so that her husband can come join her, or her friends will come and join her. And so she'd be like, oh, I'm in Greece for this summit, but then some of my friends are coming out afterward and we're going to spend 2 weeks learning how to sail. What? So I don't know if I'd say I mean, definitely inspiring, but also I want to be her. Um, just because I didn't realize that was a job you could have where you got to go places. And like, I understand it's a job. You have to work and be good at the things you do while you're there. But I didn't even know that you could like do that. So definitely my cousin Hannah, because she's the coolest.
That sounds very cool. And whenever you end up doing that, I hope I get an invite to
Absolutely.
somewhere. Um,
Absolutely.
okay, so my next question for you is what has most surprised you about your 20s and like this stage of your life?
That there is no metric for success.
Interesting.
None. Like my best friend Abigail, she is a teacher. She's doing exactly what she's always known she wanted to do. She's a seventh grade science teacher. She's doing great. She's like the most put together person I know. And she lives with her family. She still lives with her parents and her three, well, one of her younger siblings is away at college, but her two other siblings who were in high school still, she still lives with them because she saves on rent. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. And you are the most put together person that I know. So having your full time job where it is does not make any sense for you to move out, and your parents are like, no, you don't have to move out, so you just stay home, that's great. And some people are like, oh, you still live with your parents? Heck yeah, she still lives with her parents. Do you know
Yeah.
how much cheaper it is? She's going to pay off her student loans less than 2 years after graduating on a teacher's salary because she doesn't have to pay rent. That's insane. Then there's like me and you who don't have jobs, who don't know what's going on in that realm. But we both, like, I don't personally feel like I'm failing because I don't know who I'm supposed to be comparing myself to. Like, Abigail has a job, but she still lives at home. I'm married and I live in a new state. I don't have a job. I work at love that for me. Um, Free coffee every day. That is like the best part because waking up at 3:30 in the morning to go to work is actually ass. Anyway, I don't think that you or I are behind anyone. I don't think that my friends who are still in grad school are behind. My friends who are still my age that I entered undergrad with that are still working on their undergrad because they had to take a leave of absence to work, or they did this, or they just took an extra semester so that they could take fewer classes. Like, there's no metric for being successful right now. And I'm like, okay, well, everyone turns 22 or 23 and they graduate college and then they get a job and move out, or they go to grad school. That is not the case. And I hate that because I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not. You
I
know?
totally feel that. I totally feel that. I love that you said that, and that's kind of something that I need to like wrap my head around because I've always been a very straight laced person, like squared, like this has to be done this way, and if I didn't do it this way, you suck. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird because I'm not gonna say that about anybody else because I don't think that, but I'll say it about myself. So I just think that you're right. Like it's something that I feel like people need to realize and that it's okay that you're going at your own pace.
Exactly.
And
Nobody's plan is everybody else's plan. And that's really confusing because in college or in like middle school and high school, everyone does the same thing. Because if you don't graduate on time, like that's the exception, not the rule. And yet in college, you just get to choose what happens next to you. And that means not everyone's going to choose the same thing anymore. And it's so confusing for everyone involved.
yeah. So talking about like how we're coming to these realizations as like 20-year-olds, baby 20-year-olds. Um, like how did you looking back, how did you imagine yourself at this age? Is it any different or similar? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I am not anywhere where I thought that I would be. Um, there's a small amount of backstory that's gonna make sense when I'm done. My mom has an aunt Mary who died when I was like a baby, but she was apparently the coolest woman to ever exist, and I fully believe that. My mom will tell me about her. She was, I think she was unmarried, and she had this apartment with like, she would tell me all the time about the apartment. The apartment had like jewel toned couches and it was a very high ceilinged apartment, and she had all these like huge pieces of art, and she traveled, and she, like, she lived in Saudi Arabia for a while, and she lived in Europe, and she had this furniture piece that's from like the 17 or 1800s or something that we still own, that's like been passed down, that she just like thrifted basically while living in like Austria, and just had shipped home because that's something she just was like, yeah, I feel like doing this. And I don't know if she ever got married. She just like traveled and did her work, which was something not very glamorous, but at the same time it afforded her the ability to go where she wanted and do what she wanted and have the kind of life that she wanted. And I thought that I would be like my great Aunt Mary. I thought that I would not get married at least until I was more than 30, and that by the time I graduated my undergrad, everyone would be clamoring to be my bestie and hire me for all the coolest positions where I got to do whatever I wanted and be wherever I wanted. And in fact, that is not the case. I'm not unhappy with where I am in the slightest, but it is not. If you had told me in when I graduated high school that when I graduated college, I would be planning my wedding, not having a plan for like having a plan, but not having a job, going back to live with my parents for a few months before moving out on my own, still with no job and just a dream, and then being married like within a year, I would call you an absolute liar and tell you were crazy. This is not at all, but that doesn't mean it's like a bad thing. I'm very happy with all of my decisions, even if it's put a lot more question marks over what's going to happen next. So, yeah.
I guess this could be a follow-up question too. How do you think that, not to like dwell on it too much, but how do you think like past Maggie or like high school Maggie, what would she think of like now you? Because I find that such a hard thing to reconcile and I need to get over is that like I think in part my younger self would be disappointed and I need to let that go. And then, but also, but like I'm not. I mean, in some ways I am. Obviously, I wish my process would be faster because I'm a impatient person. Like I'm not like thinking I'm failing, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. High school Maggie would definitely, her first reaction would be married to a guy at how old are you? Because this, I am in a very nurturing and loving relationship. And
Oh, oh,
sometimes when
oh,
you know,
yeah.
you know. However, this was not, we started dating when I was a freshman in college and we got engaged when I was a junior. And if, like I said, less than a year before I started dating this guy, if you had told me that I was going to get married at 23, I'd be like, you're lying. You're wrong. And if I'd known that at 23 or at like 18, whatever age you graduate high school, I definitely would have been like, you're crazy.
I think it's like so interesting how much you can change and like not a lot because that was what, 5 years ago? Like, y- yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
okay. So,
As for like the job stuff, I think that, yeah, I was just gonna say that there's no way I could have known one way or another if I would have a job by now. So I'd be like, I bet I would, but I don't know what that job would have been. So the biggest thing is you've been like, yeah, she's 23, she's married, and she doesn't have a job. I'd be like, two of those things make sense.
okay. So my next question for you is, in general, what would you say is something that you're struggling with?
I knew this question was coming, and I had a really good answer, and I was like, I should write that down, and I did not.
Oh,
Um, Definitely something I could say that I'm struggling with. Maybe it's not, if it hits me, I will say it. My what my previous answer was, but like, is keeping myself moving forward. Right now, we're kind of like in a holding pattern. We both work, we pay all our bills. We've got a cute little apartment. We've got two cats. So it's hard to remember that I want to keep pushing myself forward because I go to work and then I come home and I'm like, oh my God, do I want to apply for jobs that I'm going to get rejected to right now? No. I'm currently deciding between a couple of grad schools and if loans are something that we're going to be taking out in the near future. And that's like paralyzing. No, I don't want to go read about loans and interest rates right now. I think that I will, simply remain stagnant, but that's not something that you can do. Like, there's nobody to push you forward at this age except for yourself. There's nobody to hold you accountable except for yourself for the things that you do. And so I think definitely something I'm struggling with is reminding myself if I want to move forward, there's no more safety net. I have to move forward or I will not move. So that means, I go to work at 3:30 in the morning and I come home at noon and I'm exhausted and I want to take a nap and my stomach hurts because, in your 20s, I think everyone's stomach hurts all the time. Everyone that I work with, everyone that I talk to, all of our stomachs hurt always. I come home, I want to take a nap, maybe drink some water. Who knows last time I did that? But you can't do that. You have to keep going forward. And I don't know if everybody else struggles with this, but I find that really, really hard sometimes.
yeah. I definitely agree. And it's like I always say this to myself. Like I always think about this. I feel like I cannot keep compromising, if that makes sense. Like to me,
Yes.
it's like not that I'm ungrateful for it, but at the beginning, okay, like my first thought when I graduated high school was I'm gonna go study music. Then I was like, we're compromising, like that doesn't really pay the bills. A. Two, frankly, you're not good enough. Um, And then I was like, okay, like let's study something that's like adjacent to music. I kind of sort of did that, right?
Mhm.
Now I graduated. Okay. And I'm like, okay, I've honed in that I want to do like marketing in Los Angeles in the music industry. Now I'm like, well, now it's really film. Like, anyways, that's a side note. Um, but then I was like, okay, all three are not really working out together. And so then I have to keep downgrading and downgrading and downgrading. And that is really like, first of all, annoying, but it's really discouraging. And it's like, okay, like I'm just gonna keep compromising and then like not. Like that's a fear. I know that like I'm the only one that's in charge of that, but a fear of mine is that I keep compromising so much that I like let it go and don't keep moving forward, like you said.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that the not letting yourself continue to compromise just because it's easier
Yeah.
is so hard, unreasonably so.
So I definitely relate to that, and I know that a lot of people probably do too. Um, my next question for you, I want to know if there's a piece of media or pop culture that has like impacted you personally.
Okay, yes. And my answer is The Lord of the Rings because not because I a relate to like its actual content or it like showed me anything about myself that I needed to know. However, Lord of the Rings is one of like the books first and then the movies is one of the like absolute bases for like fantasy books, movies, that entire genre bases itself so much today off of Lord of the Rings. And that is like my entire life. I play D&D. The only books I read are fantasy books unless it's science fiction. And I sometimes delve into science fiction. I like science fiction, but sci-fi fantasy is better. And all of that comes from J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. And I understand that it's not like, like I really relate to this movie because it made me feel seen or something, and that's like media for people is really important in that way. And I definitely know that there are parts and things in media, in the general media, that do that for me. But I don't think anything has influenced my life or impacted me so greatly, obviously inadvertently, than the creation of Lord of the Rings, because I don't know who I would be without all of the things that come from what that started. Furthermore, J.R.R. Tolkien is like a god when it comes to languages. He wrote several fully with with like you can write in them in hand. I'm forgetting what that's called. Like there's actual letters, there's entire lexicons, there's grammar, there's and it's like the coolest thing ever. There are books about writing languages based on how J.R.R. Tolkien did it, which is so cool because and I realized why that was so exciting to me because I studied linguistics and I was like, wow, this is I didn't know any of these things, but they all make a ton of sense to me and I would love to learn how to I don't even know. I'd love to just learn more. And the fact that there's a guy out here who's like, yeah, let me just invent 60 million years of backstory and lore for my little hobbitsies and also six new languages for this book. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing I think anyone has ever done. And there are so many things in media today that are important to me that would not exist at all had it not been for him writing Lord of the Rings back in the 30s. There would be no Dungeons and Dragons, and there probably would be no Stormlight Archive, and there probably would be no Percy Jackson, and there would be probably no a lot of other things if it were not for J.R.R. Tolkien. And we all should say thank you to him.
I agree. Let's say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, J.R.R. Tolkien.
It's crazy to me how like one piece of media can like propel an entire genre or like an entire trend of things, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And yeah. Okay, so my next question is what are you looking forward to in your 20s? Like either long term, short term?
I think the thing, well, okay. I'm definitely looking forward to getting a job, figuring out what is actually going to happen next. Will I want to pursue? So, but that's not for a while. I think this is so cliche, but just like seeing where they take me because I'm somewhere that I'm really happy with right now. I have a job, even if it's not like a career. And I have a very wonderful husband whom I love. And I have two adorable kitty cats. And right now, life feels really good. And I know that there's so much more exciting things for me to do in the next 7 years. I mean, not that life ends when you turn 30, but I mean, it kind of does. I'm sure I'll turn 30 and think about this and be like,
They say the 30s are the new 20s.
it's because you're too broke in your 20s to do anything until you're 30. Um, not being broke, am I allowed to say that? As what I'm looking most forward to is having a real career so that I'm not broke anymore.
Woo!
That would be cool. No, I'm going to go with my cliche answer and say seeing all of the even more exciting things that are ahead of me because I'm very happy where I am right now. But I also know that I am capable of accomplishing more. And so long as I can keep putting one foot in front of the other and moving forward, I cannot wait to see where that will be.
All right, Maggie. So, my last question is, what do you want to rant about? What do you want to geek out on? What do you want to anything? Any topic that's been on your mind that you would want to talk about? Let it
I,
out.
I kind of already talked about it when you asked me about my most favorite and impactful piece of media, which is Lord of the Rings, because I am 150% owned by any fantasy literature that I have ever read. I recently read a series called The Stormlight Archive. There are only four books out. Book five comes out this year. None of the books are less than 1,000 pages. They are by Brandon Sanderson, who has written 8 billion books a year for his entire life. And there's supposed to be 10 books in the series. Only four are out. I read the last book, which was 1,200 pages, on my honeymoon. And I read the last 600 pages in one day because they were so good. And I did not do anything else. I ignored David the whole day. We hung out by the pool. We hung out in our room. I didn't talk to him. I was like, sorry, this is more important right now. And I don't even know what my point is here, except that to be so incredibly owned by a piece of media as that you will waste, I don't want to call it waste. You'll spend 24 hours of like your 1 week of doing nothing with your, new spouse to just consume it. Like I finished it and I like cried because it was over. And it wasn't over. There's gonna be 6 more books. It is in fact part of something called the Cosmere, which is like 50 of the Brandon Sanderson books that actually all connect. Before this, like last year, I hadn't read any books written by Brandon Sanderson, even though I knew that he was like a very big name in like fantasy and sci-fi fiction because I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was like I'd be getting into too much or I didn't know where to start. But um, thank you TikTok for recommending The Way of Kings, which is the first book in the Stormlight Archive for me. Um, I There are two more books, they're novellas in this Stormlight Archive series that are not part of like they're just like side stories, not of like the main characters, but they have like more information, more world building. Oh, they'll get mentioned in passing. I'm saving them for this summer so that I can read them when I'm at my lowest because I cannot handle waiting until December for the next book to come out. But if I read them now, then I have to wait till December. Like I'm so down bad over these Stormlight books. It's been like 2 months since I finished the last one, and I was like, I need content. I've seen every post on Tumblr that I can get my hands on. I can't do too much on TikTok or I'll get spoilers for the other books in the Cosmere. And I don't even know if that's a good thing to rant about, but it's just like there are some forms of media where no matter how much they put in front of you, which includes 1,200 page books, it is not going to be enough. I'm going to be like 40 by the time this series is finished, and I will be drooling over every book the moment it comes out. I joined a Discord server with other people who love these books. Like it's about the Cosmere just in general. So it's all the Brandon Sanderson books. So there are only a couple channels that I can lurk in without too many spoilers. But
Right. I was gonna say.
but it's I'm like unwell. It's like the only thing I can think about.
I just read romance books. I read some of them are trashy. I don't care. Um did I tell you about this? My brother once was like, yeah, you only read romance books because you don't have any in your actual life.
Damn.
The
You
disrespect.
don't say that.
The disrespect.
You're not allowed to say that. You can. That's wrong.
Think it. You can think it. I was like, who?
He was
I
wrong for that.
okay, girl.
I don't
I,
read like fantasy books because I'm looking to get stabbed with a sword. It's it's
no,
not like that.
no,
I
but
mean,
there's.
maybe a little bit. That
I
would be so exciting, but more exciting than working at Starbucks. Okay.
mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some truth to what he said, but he doesn't have to say it.
He does not have to say it. That was disrespectful.
Oh,
You didn't
disrespectful.
deserve that.
Thank you so much. Um, all right, we can keep going at this forever, but
Yeah. I don't really know if there was a point to that rant that wasn't like it was just definitely something that's on my mind is that my ass has been owned, unfortunately, and there's nothing I can do about it. Rant
okay,
over.
okay. One last question. So, if people are interested and want to start reading those books, where do you recommend that they start?
Okay. So it depends on if you are someone who likes to read or is looking to get into reading. If you're looking to get into reading and you think fantasy is where you want to go, you like Lord of the Rings, you like well, I don't know why Lord of the Rings is the only thing you can think of right now for fantasy movies, but there are plenty more. You like fantasy, but you don't read a lot. Do not start with the Stormlight Archive. You will not succeed. I almost didn't succeed. Okay. I would say for fantasy, a really good one and slightly less known to start with is John Gwynn. He does a lot of, he has like 2 to 3 finished fantasy series that are very fast paced. They're kind of Celtic in origin. He's working on a third that is Norse themed and will be done hopefully this year. I would say John Gwynn is a really good one. They're a little bit brutal, but let's see. I mean, if you like Harry Potter, then I would look into some of Naomi Novik's works. I like her a lot, and she has some slightly more intellectual and more magic based as opposed to uh really fantasy based novels. If you have read The Lord of the Rings and are just like in a super drought and want something that has the same kind of meat to it and long hero's journey type story building, then I would recommend the Stormlight Archive. If you like Star Wars and you don't know what you want to read, look into Andy Weir, The Martian. If you like the Martian movie, you'll love the book. It is not technically complicated, which I was worried about, and he has a couple of other sci-fi books that are very good that I recommend. Um, I read something else sci-fi recently that was really good. I've heard Gideon the Ninth is good, which is kind of fantasy sci-fi. Um, which is on my list to read. And I remembered the sci-fi books. And I recommend these if you're okay with a little bit of gore, just a small amount
Mm-hmm.
of descriptions, but you're struggling to get back into reading because you're used to TV, movies, or video games, and you're like, the medium of reading is difficult because there's just the words on the page and you have to do it all yourself and you need something to bridge that gap. The Illuminae files. It is sci-fi based. It is about like there's a mining colony on some planet far on some moon far away that gets like bombed in some conspiracy thing, and all the people on the colony have to evacuate onto these ships, and something happens on one of the ships and everyone on the other ship is trying to figure out what happened on the first one. And so it follows like a group of teenagers, because isn't it always teenagers who are trying to find out what is going on. And there's 3 books. And I highly recommend them if you are trying to get into reading. If you like Star Wars even a little bit, if you think a little bit of sci-fi, but you're looking farther into fantasy, I still recommend them because they provide a really good transitional medium. Like there are pictures, and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I definitely recommend those as a transitional medium because they are very, very good.
Interesting. I might have to check that one out. I'm not a very fantasy, sci-fi girly, but that sounds interesting. All right. Now we're gonna have to actually wrap this up.
Yes, sorry.
No, you're good. I got carried away as well. Okay. So thank you so much, Maggie, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I was nervous and this is a lot of fun.
I'm so glad you had so much fun. Okay, so and thank you everyone for listening slash watching. Um and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Follow us on me on Aspiring Adult Podcast on Instagram and then Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.